Pick the biggest guy standing.
All right, well, good morning, everybody, and I want to welcome everybody to the press event. And my name is Charles Addington. I'm the director for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Justice Services. And today we're here to announce a major law enforcement operation targeting drug trafficking in and around Indian country here in North Carolina that's resulted in the arrest of 75 individuals for drug trafficking charges. First, I want to recognize partners for this Trump administration's DOI opioid task force. We've got a group of folks here behind us that has been outstanding partners with Indian country. And I want to first recognize the Eastern Band of Cherokee Principal Chief Richard Sneed for all of his support of his staff and his facilities while we went through this operation. And also the Cherokee Indian Tribal Chief of Police, Doug Pheasant. And then also the Drug Enforcement Administration, the team leader for this operation for our task force here, Sean Ziotti, and Assistant Special Agent in Charge, William Baxley. Numerous sheriff's offices and city police departments, different organizations has been a tremendous help to us in these operations, and I just want to recognize all of the different departments, sheriff's offices and different departments that's helped us here. Swain County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Curtis Cochran, and Jackson County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Chip Hall, City of Asheville Police Department Chief Tammy Hooper, Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Van Duncan, McDowell County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Ricky Buchanan, Henderson County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Charles McDonald, Rutherford County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Chris Francis, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, and the North Carolina State Highway Patrol Trooper Andy Waycaster. And I always want to also recognize our Bureau of Indian Affairs Division of Drug Enforcement agents that's been here on the ground assisting and leading the operation. Our lead investigator has been doing tremendous work throughout Indian country, not only here on Cherokee, North Carolina, but in other places throughout Indian country. And Billy Stites, I want to recognize him for all the fantastic work he's done here today. So I want to now turn over and introduce the Assistant Special Agent in Charge for the Drug Enforcement Administration out of the Charlotte, North Carolina office, William Baxley.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate it. On behalf of the Drug Enforcement Administration, just want to take a moment to thank our federal, state, local, and tribal partners, as well as our federal and state prosecutors who are working on this case. You know, the scope and size of this investigation is indicative of the crisis that we're facing with heroin, opioids, methamphetamine in our community. I've been doing this a long time, and there was a time when heroin was a big city, inner city problem. But now we're seeing this affect our communities, rural communities, tribal communities. It crosses all strata of social, geographic locations. It's something that we consider at the Drug Enforcement Administration to actually be a crisis epidemic. So this case is very indicative of what we're facing across the country. The work that everyone associated with this case has done is tremendous. The men and women that are combating the illicit drugs that are going on in our community, we can't thank them enough, and the sacrifice that they're making to try to hold back the tide that we're facing with this. So again, I want to thank everyone's hard efforts, strong efforts in this case. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bill Stetzer with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Opioid abuse is an epidemic. Drug overdose deaths are an all-time high here and across the country. By all accounts, Native American communities are among the hardest hit. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians have experienced firsthand the devastating effects of the opioid epidemic. The numbers are staggering. The impact is real, and the time for talk is over. It's now time to find, dismantle, and prosecute drug networks that spread their poison in our neighborhoods, causing overdose deaths at rates never seen before, tearing families apart and wreaking havoc in our community. It's time now for action. The arrests announced today are law enforcement's response to this call for action. Today's operation speaks to the commitment and dedication of everyone in this room to stem the flow of drugs onto the Qualla boundary and to put a stop to the drug trade. For many months, tribal law enforcement worked side by side with federal, state, local law enforcement agencies to identify those responsible for drug trafficking and distribution and criminal activity in Indian country. Federal, state, and tribal prosecutors have also worked together to identify what would be the best venue for prosecution in these cases. So as a result of those arrested, 12 are facing federal charges that carry potential sentences of up to 20 years in prison. Secretary, as a representative of the Department of Justice, I want to thank the Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Indian Affairs for your continued support and your commitment to Native American communities. I also want to thank and recognize all of our law enforcement partners, both the agencies that have been listed and mentioned already, and also the individual agents and officers for your incredible work. We're grateful for your dedication and your commitment to protecting our communities. And last but not least, I want to thank the state, federal, and tribal prosecutors who, going forward, starting with these arrests, will work tirelessly to make sure that drug traffickers get the punishment they deserve and that justice is delivered. So next you'll hear from Principal Chief Sneed.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I first wanted to extend, on behalf of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, gratitude to the Department of Interior, to Secretary Zinke, to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, their assistance in helping to carry out this operation, to state and local authorities, and specifically I would like to thank Sheriff Curtis Cochran of Swain County and Sheriff Trip Hall of Jackson County, because prior even to this operation, they have worked tirelessly with our local law enforcement at Cherokee PD, and so I'm very grateful for the partnership that we have with them. It's my sincere hope that this operation will be a model for Indian country. While this is a national epidemic, indeed Indian country has been hit at a much harder rate, and it is my sincere hope that this will be just the first of many operations throughout Indian country. Last and certainly not least, I want to say thank you to our drug task force at Cherokee PD, Chief Doug Pheasant and his team, the law enforcement officers that day in and day out work to serve and protect our communities. And while there have been a lot of words of gratitude expressed today to those of us who are in higher ranking offices, it is the men and women of law enforcement who are putting their lives on the line every day to protect our communities, and I want to express my gratitude, my heartfelt thanks to them for what they do for us every day. With that, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Secretary of the Interior, Mr. Ryan Zinke. Mr. Secretary.
Well, it's great to be in the Carolinas again. Leadership starts at the top. First of all, I'd like to thank President Trump for making it a priority to look at the opioid crisis. And as Interior, we translate that priority to Indian country. I represent proud nations of 573 federally recognized tribes, and I take that responsibility with great honor and commitment. And behind me, we have the Eastern Band of Cherokee Chief Sneed, who is an exceptional leader. Today, we're announcing the arrest of 76, about 248 pounds of drugs, about $2 million plus of street value. And the message is clear. Indian country is off limits to drugs. We will find you, we will hunt you down, we will prosecute you. Indian country is now off limits to drugs. This is the 8th operation we've conducted, and beside me are the sheriffs, our law enforcement officials, and when I came in, we had a little round table, prior to the press here, and message is clear. We work together as a team. Law enforcement has done an incredible job. And these guys, what they do is they go out, they'll surveil, they'll make sure that the prosecutions are tight. They'll go in and they'll hunt them down. What we're seeing is that drug dealers are fleeing Indian country, and they're not welcome back. We know who they are. You come back, and you'll be in jail. But I want to commend everyone here from the city, local, state, DAA, federal, our prosecuting team. It is a team. This is a national crisis. Hardest hit is Indian country. You look at the statistics, the opioid crisis, oftentimes kids become mules, and it's devastating our communities. And this is going to come to an end. So appreciate everyone being here. I especially appreciate the hard work of the men and women behind me and those people in the field every day. But we will continue this operation. This is going to be a long, long battle. This is our 8th operation, and we're going to continue this until the war is won. So, thank you. With that, we'll take questions.
Are
Yes, ma'am.
many of the people who were arrested were they people who had lived on the reservation, or are they people who came in to sell the drugs?
For that technical question.
Yeah, I think there's a little of both. We do have a lot of folks from outside that do bring in and traffic drugs in Indian country, but across the board, we see folks that do live on the reservation that deal, but folks, the suppliers are usually from outside of Indian country.
Can someone talk a little bit about the 12 that are now facing federal charges? What were maybe more of those crimes, or why single out those 12 for federal charges versus the others?
Certainly. We look at weights, we look at distribution, we look at criminal history to see if they qualify for federal prosecution. The majority of the 12 I spoke about will be charged with possession with intent to deliver controlled substances. And so they met our criteria for federal prosecution. We would like to have taken more, but we do have to meet the federal criteria for federal jurisdiction.
A previous 2-year investigation, which ran concurrent to this operation, led to 56 arrests. What changed, or what was the big difference with this operation? How did it function so that you were able to secure 76 arrests in the span of about 7 months?
I think back in January when we started the DOI Opioid Task Force initiative, the Secretary had us start putting these operations together. So in March, we started the operation here. It had been going on. We'd had other things going on before that. So the catalyst was for this, and these 75 was in March we began the Opioid Task Force operation, which led to these arrest of these 75 folks.
And is that just more people, more investigators working on the cases, or what is it about that task force that changes things drastically?
Yeah, the focus is on opioids, and of course you bring in more resources to the table, and you're more focused on a certain violations. And also, I think this operation has netted about 132 people. That there was stuff going on prior to March as well. So it's been an ongoing operation prior to that.
Thank you.
The construct of the task forces, Interior has about 4,500 law enforcement officials from U.S. Park Police to BIA, BLM. What we do is we combine those task forces together. We work with tribal leaders, the governments, the tribal police. We respect the sovereignty of the nation, so we're invited in. When we're invited in, we work very closely, in this case, very, very closely with the leadership of the tribal police. We begin to look at the drug dealers and the critical elements of that distribution. And then we'll conduct the operation in concert with our prosecuting team, our state, federal, local sheriffs. We'll come in as a team. Oftentimes, Indian country does not have the assets standing by all the time. So a task force brings, all expertise, more people to bear, more professionals to bear, and making sure that the cases we do prosecute, we win. So again, it's a working together from city, tribal, state, federal agencies, all working in one common goal to eradicate drugs in any country.
Mr. Secretary, if I may, also I'd like to say, an operation like this, what we're looking to do is have an impact on the community. Our typical investigations, we work organizations and we've worked through, but with the opioids and heroin, you have a unique situation in that you're dealing mostly, the consumers are addicts. So if we take off a few at a time, then they just go to a different supplier. So the way to have the biggest impact that is by taking off everyone that we can, and then those addicts cannot go to a different supplier. They have to leave the area or go into rehab. So the way to have the biggest impact with addicts is to have an operation of this scope and size. It allows us to go in and basically sweep the streets from high level to low level, and it puts all those users in a unique situation where they're forced to leave the communities, in this case the tribal communities, or they're forced to go into rehab, which is what we really would like to see. So having an operation of this scope allows us to go in, it impacts all the known dealers that we know about, and it also affects those that aren't, that we don't have charges on. So in this case, my supervisor here can tell you, in this case, we're facing a situation where even people that we didn't arrest are fleeing the area because they're hearing about this large scope operation. So this has a tremendous effect, local impact on what on the community, more so than taking off the typical cell heads that we go after or the operational leaders. By doing a top to bottom operation like this, we're having the biggest impact on the community in a long-term way, and forcing a lot of these guys, like I said, to go into rehab. So.
Can someone explain a little bit, is it that the suppliers are on the reservation then, and they're distributing out to the community, or is it the other way around? Talk a little bit about how you get down.
Yes, what we found out is, meeting with the local sheriffs and talking, several years ago, we started meeting with the area task force, and we started discussing different people that are distributors that we were dealing with. And we found out that we were talking about the same people regardless of what community it was. If it was the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, or if it was Jackson County, Swain County, Henderson County, we're meeting, we're describing the exact same people on the reservation that was in their communities too. And with the different conferences and everything, we met with different states for dealing with the same people also. So we found out that there was a network of people that were delivering to the reservation. We felt like the best way to combat that was to catch the dealer as they were trying to get to the reservation before they can get there and distribute that stuff out to the smaller dealers and have more weight, and like I said, choose the best venue for prosecution to receive more penalties and more time in jail.
Of the 76 people arrested, are those all drug traffickers or drug dealers, or do those include users as well? What's the breakdown?
The majority of those were traffickers. When dealing with the opioid epidemic, we find that there's more and more traffickers that are users also. But if they're dealing on the reservation or bringing stuff to the reservation to our communities, then we're going to prosecute them as the traffickers that they are.
Can you put this in historical perspective as far as the scope and also the cooperation and all the agencies working with, you know, the Indian Nation to address this situation?
Well, large scale, well, our department, we have probably about 130 employees total. We have a small task force of about 4 guys that work day and night for that. But teaming together with the other agencies and everything, we put together, you know, over 100 officers just to fill out this operation just in any country. It's not, there are other agencies that were serving the warrants in other townships and other counties at the same time that we had 100 officers on the reservation that were serving warrants at the same time. So it was a pretty large scale operation
would say, overall, it's unprecedented that Interior, overall, it's unprecedented the level of effort that Interior has put forth. Never before has a task force of this size and magnitude been created. Never before have we done continuous operation. Now this is our 8th. And I would say, I can't guarantee never before, but in my memory, I don't remember a Secretary of Interior getting personally involved with opioid drug operations at the scale we're doing. It is personal to me. Interior is the champion of our Indian nations. That is my honored job, and we're serious about it. So I spend a lot of time on this issue with my team, looking at where it's almost back to the days when I was a Navy SEAL. Looking at the networks, determining what resources we can bring to bear, coordinating with our federal and local friends. Again, it's at the invitation of our sovereign nations. I respect the sovereignty of the tribes, but relationship, this is a joint effort, and we're serious about it. So I think the level is probably unprecedented from the president all the way down.
And when you say the 8 other operations, or I'm sorry, is it 7 others, including this one is the 8th?
I believe this is the 8th.
Okay, and where were the others?
We had a couple in Minnesota, Montana, the border, New Mexico, Washington. We have 573 federally recognized tribes. We are continuing to this, and what was pointed out too, this is what we're battling is a network. And so as you hit one place, they tend to move to another. We're anticipating that, and we are continuing to hunt them down. So our next operation, we normally don't disclose where we're going to go, and we could come right back out here too. So we want to make sure we keep them off balance and we hunt them down. But the message has to be clear: that Indian country is now off limits.
I think in talking to many of the law enforcement representatives that are up here today, they've said we can't arrest our way out of this problem. So is there any type of assistance that's being then provided for some of these people in the opioid crisis to kind of curb that?
Well, you're exactly right. You look at the national problem. And so we are giving more assets and resources towards rehabilitation. We're looking at typically the tribes, the moms and grandmas hold an elevated status of keeping the tribe together, the fabric. So we're looking at making sure the moms and grandmas have the right resources for rehab to get off the drugs, kids, and obviously, so we're looking at the resources too behind it. We think a first step is to make sure that people are not selling drugs with impunity, that our law enforcement has the right tools, and our community leaders, the chiefs and the tribe itself has the right resources. But it is a multiple prong effort, and this is going to be a long and drawn out battle. But this is a significant step forward.
Last question? Principal Sneed, if you could, can you give us some perspective about the statistics of people on on the land that are suffering from drug abuse and addiction?
Well, I can't give you absolute data points, but I will say this, that when I look at the number of folks that we have in our community who are addicted, the amount of resources as a tribe that we're putting to combat, and again, it has to be a holistic approach. We're on the law enforcement side, we're putting a lot of our resources to fight it that way, but also to the point that you brought up, we can't arrest our way out of this. The tribe is putting a tremendous amount of resources to rehabilitation. We've built our own rehab. The tribal council has just approved a second phase to the hospital that will have a crisis stabilization unit. The gap that we were finding was that when people are going through withdrawal or they're at the point where they feel like they're ready to get treatment, oftentimes there's a wait period that may be 2 weeks to a month. And in that time frame, we had no place for them to go. Oftentimes they go right back to the lifestyle that they were in. So we feasibility study, and a plan was formulated to have a crisis stabilization unit that would basically be a detox and kind of a pre-counseling, pre-therapy to get them prepped and ready to go to rehab once a bed is available. So the tribal council just approved that, I think, 2 months ago, and we ratified that and signed off on it. So we'll begin the second phase of the hospital. It takes a tremendous amount of resources, specifically with when we're talking about heroin and opioids, because statistically, people will tend to relapse 2 to 3 times on average. It's frustrating, I think, for a lot of the rest of the community, because it does take a lot of resources. But at the end of the day, this is the next generation, and if we don't combat this and treat it as a medical crisis that it is, and instead just incarcerate people, we're not dealing with the problem. So again, it has to be a holistic approach, law enforcement, healthcare, certainly the medical health side of it, or rather the mental health and behavioral health side. Many of the rehabs that I visited and on other reservations that are having a lot of success, all of the doctors and the healthcare professionals I spoke to all said the same thing, that the majority of your folks who are addicted also have mental health or behavioral health issues that have gone undiagnosed for a long time, and then they begin to self-medicate. We can't treat one without treating the other, otherwise they're going to go right back to where they're at. So it's really taking a whole new approach to this. It's not like treating somebody for alcoholism or something like that. It's highly addictive and does consume a lot of resources. But again, if we don't deal with this, we're losing a generation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Well, just in closing, I just want to, once again,